Hello, welcome back, welcome in. It's that time, everyone. It's game week here on the Sooners on SI podcast. I'm Ryan Chapman hanging out in More America up in the 918. We've got 918 Hoover, the great John Hoover. Boss, how are things?
Man, all I know is it's game week. We made it, people. We made it to game week. I'm so excited, so hyped.
We fought long and hard. We are finally here. Kickoff Friday, 6 p.m. Be there or be square. To be sold out, which means Hoover will be there as well as our good friend Randall Sweet down on the field. Randall up in Oklahoma City. What's up, my friend? How are you?
Doing great. I'm about 24 hours out from my lone fantasy football draft of the year, so preparing mentally.
Well, the good news is if you're one of those that's looking for all the Sooners in the NFL, all that stuff, you draft them all on your fantasy team. You come to Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com every single Sunday night, Monday. You'll get all the tracking there. And we've also got our free agency tracker slash cut day tracker slash whatever is some guys made it, some guys didn't, some guys are in new spots and all over the board there. Good job by Randall putting that together on Wednesday. But gentlemen, it's game week and we're here to talk about the thing that has shaken everyone in the last 48 hours. And that, of course, is the fact that Connor Stallions has finally spoken to Netflix in a fantastically produced, but just Michigan. No, I'm kidding. Shout out Dan Wetzel. Shout out Ross Dellinger. I wonder what Pat Forty's doing, not making it into the doc, but having to do the pod. Of course, before we dive into the game week stuff, it wouldn't be the Oklahoma beat without there was a suspension. It doesn't matter, frankly. DeMarco Murray was suspended on Tuesday for one game. It is a one-game suspension dating to back a little bit. Impermissible contact with 17 recruits over a 16-month period. It was 30-something texts, 60-something phone calls. The NCAA listed a whole slew of Oklahoma self-reported and has done this and has done this, and they've already reduced that. They've already served that. There's three big things left. Thing one, DeMarco Murray, one-game suspension. Brent Venables on Wednesday, SC teleconference, declined to comment on when that suspension would be served. Sooners on SI has reported that suspension will be served Friday night against the Temple Owls. Thing two, no unofficial visits for Oklahoma. They cannot host. Guess what? It's a Friday night game. Guess who plays on Friday night? High school recruits. Oklahoma's going to be just fine there. Thing three is there will be a 3-week period of no electronic contact starting sometime December 8th is the beginning of that. It stretches all the way to March. I think that they'll be able to figure that out. It was not what we expected to be doing on our Tuesday of game week. Is the sky falling? Has Brent Venables lost control of the program?
That's a good way of asking it. Is Brent Venables now on the hot seat because his program is just they're terrorizing the campus? Yeah. So, no. What's interesting to me about this is that Brent immediately and on the conference call as well today on the SEC call, he said we're here to follow the rules. The rules are the rules. People can make mistakes. He said he is incredibly disappointed. Those are his words. Incredibly disappointed. But big picture, and here's what he said: DeMarco took responsibility. He said DeMarco knows. So there was a little bit of disconnect between the COVID waiver has been extended. Oh no, it's that extension has expired. Bottom line, this means almost nothing. Who's going to coach running backs is the only question I have. And when that was asked today on the conference call, on the SEC conference call, Brent declined to answer. He said it's going to be a Johnny Holstaff situation. They're going to bring Bill Beatonbow out of the bullpen in the third inning, and maybe even the defensive staff will get in. I don't know. What you can bet is that they've got four full-time offensive analysts, and one of those four guys, probably not the two quarterback guys, although maybe might be one of them, but essentially it's going to be one of those offensive analysts who is in charge of substituting the running backs. Run this guy. Don't put him in that situation. Make sure he's out of there if you need somebody to pass block, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would like to volunteer. I'll take one game check. I'll coach the running backs if they need me on Friday night. Temple stinks. We'll get to it. We actually are not going to talk about Temple at all. Sorry to our friends, the Owls. But Randall, you look at it, it's kind of one of those things. DeMarco Murray signed the top running back in the country. A lot of the infractions, penalties, whatever, were all minor, have been served. Are we even going to notice on Friday night? If you didn't tell me, Randall, ahead of the game that DeMarco Murray was going to miss this game, would I notice that he's not on the sideline?
I would assume that no, you wouldn't notice because, like you mentioned, Temple's not very good. You'd expect Oklahoma to run up the score early, be able to put a lot of those running backs into the game anyway. And you have to think with the talent that Oklahoma has at that running back depth chart, whoever they put out there on the field is going to be able to, make enough happen against the Temple Owls to be all right on Friday. And like you mentioned, Oklahoma has been a team that hasn't really dealt with many of these infractions too often, especially in recent years. So I don't think that this is anything to be too concerned about or worry that this is going to continue to happen.
Yeah, I'm covering my 21st season in a row on the OU football beat. This is the first time in my time doing this that there's been a suspension of this kind, of any kind, for an assistant coach for a game. It's I think there was a basketball situation maybe once or twice with Jeff Capel, but this football-wise, it's never happened. So it's really rare. OU's been out in front now. Keep in mind, since Brett Bomar got kicked off the team in 2006, OU has been in front of the curve on everything to do with compliance, NCAA compliance. They took their compliance department out of the athletic department, put it in the president's office, and said they're administrators now. They don't answer to the athletic people. They don't answer to coaches. They don't answer to the athletic director. They just administer NCAA compliance. And ever since 2006, OU has been one of the leaders in the nation in this department. That's how rare this is.
Yeah, self-reported. There was a 2-month lag in the phone call logs, all that stuff. Frankly, the way more interesting part of the release was the track coach, who sounds like just wild. Also, the track coach went to the Jeremy Pruitt of "I'm going to cheat and also suck," so that was kind of interesting. There's a reason that he's unemployed. I'm sure this has something to do with it. I'm sure the results, frankly, do as well. So anyway, we probably spent too much time already on the DeMarco Murray stuff, but that was the big shocking thing I think that happened this week. If that was shock 1A, shock 1B might have been a true freshman is going to start on the defensive line, defensive tackle Jaden Jackson. We'll dive into all that. We got our first depth chart of the year that popped out on Sunday. We're not going to go line by line. I think a lot of that stuff, I don't think anyone's shocked that Jackson Arnold is QB1. A lot of the offensive line stuff, we predicted all of that. But over the course, let's rope this all into one, guys. We had the first game week Brent Venables press conference back on Monday. Monday night, we then talked to a whole host of players. I think the final tally was 6, including Jaden Jackson. We talked to Jackson Arnold, talked to Danny Stutzman, Brennan Thompson, Kendall Dolby, Jalil Farouk, and have I missed anyone? That sounds like the crew. Dominic Williams also filmed next to me, and he hung out. So Dominic Williams, good dude. Large human on the interior of that defensive line. We're going to read the vibes as we do every single week. The first Venables vibes is out. So if you don't understand where that comes from, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, my large notebook that drops I think this one didn't quite get to 1,000 words, but we almost did. Coming out of the first Brent Venables press conference. I'm going to toss over to you the first thing that stood out, but real quick, just a 10,000 foot view. Brent Venables was in a great mood. We've done a lot of body language reading with Brent Venables in these press conferences, especially in the 2022 season. I know you weren't a part of Red. It almost seemed like a weekly Hoover. Josh and I are trying to figure out, was he in a good mood? Was he in a bad mood? Did that mean that they had a good practice, a bad practice? Is there just personal lives? Brent was in a great mood on Monday, and I think that kind of reflects what we've heard from him. That there have been some rumblings behind the scenes that they feel like they might have something that could be pretty freaking good this year, which might have contributed to being quiet, more locked down. So that was my number one overall takeaway. But who specifically, once we got into the actual press conference portion, the meat and potatoes, what kind of stood out to you from Venables and co this week?
Yeah, so I refer back to on the revelation of the depth chart. Anytime they put the information out there for the first time, I want to ask the coach about it. I want to ask the head coach about some of the decisions. And in this case, my focus was on the 24K, right? Hashtag 24K, the class of 2024. How many freshmen do you have in the 2 deep? How many freshmen do you have on the depth chart? How many freshmen are going to get playing time? I'm always interested in that. How did they recruit? How much of a need is there? And what's funny is Brent was answering my first question, and I had a couple of more queued up, and he just kept answering all my follow-up questions, including sometimes it's there's a need. Sometimes the guys in front of them as they arrive as freshmen aren't that good and can be replaced or need to be replaced. And sometimes the freshmen really just are that good to take somebody else's job. And he was doing a great job answering all these questions about the freshman class. I asked him, now we're talking about two different things. We're talking about a two deep, which is a starter and a backup. And then we're talking about a depth chart, which is here are all the guys that we think are worth listing, a five deep or a four deep, right? So some positions run 4 or 5 deep. So it's two different things. On the two deep, they have 5 true freshmen, including the starter, Jaden Jackson. And on the depth chart, which is a bigger list, they have 17 true freshmen. I was on the radio today with Pat Jones here in Tulsa, and I asked him about that phenomenon. And I said, when there are freshmen stacked up at the bottom of the depth chart, right, can that mean those guys are probably getting close to playing? Could it mean that those guys are probably not going to play much this year? So let's put them on the depth chart so they can see their name in print and get excited and stay involved and engaged and encouraged. He said, yeah, that happens. Absolutely. You put a guy that might play, put a guy that might not play. You put them on the depth chart, show them where they're at, then they've got something to build from. So there's a lot to this. Brent did say that the number 17 was a lot. I looked it up in his first 2 seasons. It's been between 13 and 14 in 2022 and 14 and 15 in 2023 freshmen that were on the depth chart. And that's throughout the entire season. So the number's not abnormally huge. It's not like out there an outlier or anything, but there are more freshmen this year on the depth chart than there have been in his first couple of years. He said in this day and age, that's probably appropriate, meaning we lost some guys in the portal. We got some guys in the portal. We had some people transfer that we didn't expect, Caden Green. So we've got some freshmen on the depth chart now. So yeah, I think generally speaking, he's excited, obviously, about this freshman class, going all the way back to signing day last December, and here we are, 9 months later, almost, and we finally get to see what those guys, that class of players who signed last December, we finally get to see what they can do on a college football field.
And who, as someone who covers recruiting, and I've seen a lot of these guys play in high school. I've covered them since before they signed with OU. The freshmen, seeing them on the depth chart, it's really interesting to me as well. And you have to think that a lot of this year's number being a little bigger goes back to the talented class that OU's bringing in addition to, of course, like you said, the roster movement that goes on in college football now. But I mean, you look at some of the guys like an Eddie Pierre-Louis, who Brent Venables mentioned by name, saying that if he'd been able to come in December rather than the summer, he might have been a starter with Jaden Jackson. And so I think that when you've got you mentioned the need, but also the talented players in the trenches that you're recruiting, like a David Stone and Jaden Jackson and Eddie Pierre-Louis, when you're seeing that success on the recruiting trail, it's going to result in those guys playing early, especially for guys like Jaden Jackson, David Stone, who are able to get onto campus in December, get into the rhythm of playing college football. Even guys like Jacob Jordan, who's a walk-on and was able to get into Norman in December, made the depth chart as a walk-on true freshman. So I just think that it shows how well OU's doing on the recruiting trail, that there's so many of those guys in the lineup.
Quick wrap up on this point. OU under Venables has signed, using the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, has signed the number 8, number 5, and number 8 classes 3 years in a row. That's the first time they've been in the top 8, all 3 classes, in the last 15 years at least. And it might be further than that. It might be about 20.
It's been impressive work by this coaching staff, but it's also what we kind of expected from Brent Venables. He was a monster recruiter at Oklahoma the first time, monster recruiter at Clemson. It seems like he found a way to take that even higher, to the next level. The depth he had at Clemson across the entire starting 11, maybe not some of those defensive lines that Oklahoma had in the early 2000s, and certainly the Butkus caliber linebackers. But when you talk about guy number 1 to 22 to 25, it felt like he found a way to even expand. This is how you really capitalize in the depth that you need to sustain injuries, all that stuff. We're going to talk a great deal, I would expect, about these freshmen a little bit later when we kind of get into who we're excited to see on Friday night. I did think, though, since Monday, when the depth chart came out, Jaden Jackson was listed as the starting defensive tackle. Then we got to talk to Jaden Jackson on Monday night, which if you missed that, again, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Head over there. Totally free to watch that. If you're a YouTuber, just search John Hoover Media. All that stuff is up there. I think Oklahoma fans will have a great appreciation for Jaden Jackson. First off, you can tell he was just a little nervy being in front of 20 of us animals, just being like, tell us everything. But he really well-spoken, really bright kid. Even a little bit of fun. You can tell he's still a college freshman, which is kind of fun. But I thought it was interesting how steady and how firm he was, that he's honored. Obviously, anytime you're put in the same kind of sentence as Tommy Harris, that's a good thing. But Jaden Jackson does not see being the first name at defensive tackle before the first game when he hasn't played a live snap at Oklahoma as any kind of accomplishment. And I think that's kind of what you get out of the guys that Brent Venables is going to recruit. They know it. They see it. One thing I have thought's kind of weird, though. Feels like these days, because we're so, like, we haven't seen a game yet, there's been this reverse thing that suddenly now it's a bad thing that a true freshman is the starting defensive tackle for Oklahoma. Let me just ask this and put this out into the ether. Which, if that is where you're at and you're mentally thinking, oh God, there's a true freshman starting, this is going to be a disaster, would you feel better if DeJohn Terry was simply listed as the starting defensive tackle, Dominic Williams was listed as the starting nose guard, and Jaden Jackson was like right behind those guys? If you're worried about the depth, I'm cool with that. Oklahoma tried to sign Jermaine Lele, the Louisville transfer, had him verbally committed. He obviously flipped to Texas. They wanted Lele and Williams together. So I understand if you're worried about the depth as a whole, but merely having a true freshman get named as a starter, it fundamentally doesn't change anything on how I view this defensive line. I just think it speaks to the work ethic of Jaden Jackson, the technique that he came in with, and the work that he's done. There was a great deal said about David Stone as well. Brent Venables, if you go back to his coach's show, the radio portion of it on Sunday night, then when he was asked on Monday, seems there's no panic about David Stone. He said multiple times he's the guy that he works as hard as anyone. He's always up there. Grinding film. How do I get better at technique? He led the defensive tackles in sacks during the fall. He said that a couple of times. So no need to panic there by any means. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. I've been stewing about that for 2 days. This is where we do that on the pod. We're going to dive into a bunch of those freshmen, like we said, here in a little bit when we preview Temple, which is actually previewing Oklahoma, because Temple is, again, a 3-9 football team. But Randall, who the freshman stood out to him? What was kind of the thing that stood out to you when Brent Venables and all the players talked on Monday?
Well, I think it was really interesting hearing about Brennan Thompson, and especially after seeing him listed as the starter on the depth chart. We obviously Nick Anderson's injury plays a little bit into that, but I think still, if you were to tell someone, a couple weeks ago that Nick Anderson was going to be out for week 1, I don't think most people would peg Brennan Thompson as the guy who was going to take over and fill in that starting role. I think it says a lot about what he's been able to do this offseason, especially the guy who played sparingly last year as a true sophomore, his first year with the program after transferring from Texas. He only caught 7 passes. And so for Oklahoma to have enough faith to put him in the starting lineup in week 1, I think it really shows that he's been really consistent throughout summer and throughout the whole offseason, really, even though he dealt with some injuries there too. Obviously, we know he's got just electrifying speed, one of the fastest players in the country, 10.19 in the 100-meter dash in high school. Does not get much faster than that for college football players. And so, that speed coupled with the confidence that Oklahoma has in him, we heard from Jackson Arnold, we heard from Kendall Dolby, we heard from Jalil Farouk, all saying that he worked really hard, that he was consistent. Brennan Thompson himself said that he'd put on weight, that he'd worked really hard over the offseason. And Brent Venables talked about, him wanting to develop into more than just a go ball runner, more than a guy who's just going to rip up the seam, run a 9 route. Someone who can really run the full route tree. And that's what we heard from Jackson Arnold, from Jalil Farouk, was that he'd been really working on his route tree. And now that he has a much more complete route tree than he did when he arrived in Norman last year. And so I think if we're able to see that, that'll be really interesting, especially, like I said, guys with that type of speed don't come around very often. So if he really is able to run the full route tree, Brennan Thompson could be a dangerous receiver. And that's just another threat to throw in that offense when Nick Anderson is healthy. And I think Jaden Gibson out, you're going to need a guy like that.
Yeah, and like Randall mentioned, that the other kind of big thing, I guess, big in quotation marks, to come out of the Wednesday's SEC coaches teleconference was Angelo Anthony will be playing. That's what Brent Venables said. He's available, so that's great news for him to trust that knee, build that up again. Nick Anderson will not. I guess I've seen some rumors online. I've been told precautionary on Nick Anderson. So not a major long-term thing, but yeah, we'll see the full Brennan Thompson, I guess, second act at Oklahoma get rolling on Friday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Randall mentioned, his ability to run the full route tree, be involved in every play on the offense, not just a guy that comes in off the bench and runs a sprint once in a while and catches a deep ball. And here's the deal: he's going to be going for those deep balls, and he's going to be catching them from a guy with a strong arm. We saw it in the Alamo Bowl last December. Jackson Arnold can sling it. Jackson Arnold probably go, what would you guys say, 65 yards, maybe towards 70 with his total arm strength. I think Dylan Gabriel's deep ball hit the wall at about 55.
Yeah, especially if Arnold has the opportunity to step into the pocket, that bad boy flies.
Yep.
I would say from what we saw even back in high school when he was in the Elite 11, you can see some of that arm strength. It's a much different than Gabriel for sure.
Reminds me of when you stand there and you would watch. I'm not saying they're the same guy, but when Baker would throw and Kyler would throw, it just, when they're in line, it jumps off the arm a little bit different than the rest of the quarterbacks in the room. Yeah. That's what you get with the Jackson Arnold, the full, I guess, JFA experience. I don't know. Did he lose the F after the dance moves with the Dr. Pepper app?
Yeah, how about that for some NIL? I was hoping one of these days, like Baker Mayfield could get some back pay for his NIL efforts because the dude could dance. I'm not so sure about Jackson Arnold.
Well, hey, Baker Mayfield's made up for it with all his commercials.
Yeah,
now
progressive, right?
I was literally about to say the big miss we had there is Baker Mayfield would have stolen the show in the Dr. Pepper Fansville ads. And have you guys seen the first one? Quinn Ewers, I think, did a fantastic job playing a little bit of the straight man to the boss, talking about the have you guys seen the first one?
No.
All right. This is going to be a dramatic retelling. It's not great. Basically, the
spoilers.
boss is like,
the
boss is like, what's going on here? We need some backup. And Quinn's like, we need no backup. We don't need any backup. And the boss is like, what is happening? And Quinn's like, I don't care how good his hair is, how accomplished his family is. We need no backup. I got this. And the boss is like, I think we're talking about two different things. Quinn, good job playing off Bosworth. I'm waiting for them to butt heads a little bit with the State Tech. How do they get the OU Texas in there? We shall see. Stay with the offense. I did think that we actually maybe, if you read between the lines, got a little bit of a peek into something that we might see this season. It's something I think we've all prognosticated a little bit, but Brent Venables was asked about the week 0 games being a little bit slower, tempo being down, super small sample size. Shout out to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets for accomplishing the feat that is dragging a game down to Lincoln Riley Army levels of there are no possessions in this football game. And Brent Venables said, no, I don't think that you're going to see it be massively slower. And then he started talking about his own personal view on how fast an offense should go. Obviously, we had the Jeff Levy warp speed. He was going to go to war with the Millennium Falcon, trying to make sure that he was the fastest outlaw in all the land. And Brent Venables said, hey, I do believe in putting stress on a defense, putting it in conflict. But I think the important thing, I also believe in game control. Oklahoma's offense will go fast at times this year, but Seth Luttrell is going to, as Brent Key famously said in Ireland, run the ball. That's what's going to happen a lot. I do not think that you're going to see Oklahoma just for a 100%. Our ethos this year is to go as fast as possible, especially with, I think, some of the inconsistency you might see in the offensive line. Sounds like Brent Venables is kind of giving a little bit of dash into this offense. While you're still going to see the signaling when they go fast, it will be more of a, hey, there are times where you've got to protect the defense. And that's the great news about having a former head coach, an accomplished offensive coordinator who studied under Leach, who studied under Fedora, who studied under Kevin Wilson. All those going to get blended together. Feels like Luttrell might be the right kind of background, the right guy to pair with Brent Venables as Oklahoma takes a sleep into the SEC. And I know, Randall, that was it Jalil Farouk who kind of talked about that Monday night as well?
Yeah. He was asked about the tempo offense that Seth Littrell runs, and while he wouldn't say too much, he did assure that OU is still going to play fast at times. That speed that's not out of the playbook, that's still very much in play. But I think, like you said, kind of reading between the lines with what Brent Venables said, I think it'll be more of a reading what the defense gives you and playing fast at times when the situation calls for it, and slowing the tempo down whenever that needs to be done. But Jalil Farooq, again, wouldn't give away too much, but he did say there will be times where Oklahoma's offense plays fast. That's not out of the deck yet.
Yeah, I
Something that
don't
stands
think
out to
that's
me about
going.
this, you guys, is when we're talking about Latrell. First of all, our new guy, Dakota Gregory, got with Mason Fine. I called Mason back in the spring. He talked to Mason yesterday about what can we expect from Seth Littrell, offense wise, pace wise, tempo wise, quarterback run game wise, power run. And listen, Seth Littrell is a former John Blake / Bob Stoops fullback captain at OU, won a national championship and was the captain of that 2000 team. He knows what he knows what it takes to win a football game. He knows about game control. He loves tempo. He's not married to tempo, right? He's not going to do it every time. He's not going to feel the need to be compelled to have tempo every series, or at least flash it or act like it. Like I said, he's an old smash mouth fullback. His dad was a fullback at OU. Traditional. You're going to see a lot more traditional power run game. I think a little bit more Baylor than Texas Tech, if that makes sense. You're going to see a little bit of Texas Tech, a little bit of the air raid, a little bit of Mike Leach influence, especially the Graham Harrell, who played for Leach, quarterback for 4 years, was his offensive coordinator at North Texas. I think when you put where he wants his roots to be, it's probably going to look a little bit more like Art Briles' Baylor offense, where you've got receivers lining up outside the numbers. You've got a lot of go routes. You got a lot of deep balls. And then you come at them with wide splits up front. You come at them with power run game, vertical run game. So that's my prediction. And again, reading some of the comments from Mason Fine, I encourage you guys to go Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Click on football and scroll down. The headline is something like, I got it right here, from someone who's been there before, what to expect from Seth Littrell's offense with a young quarterback, because Mason Fine lived that life. So I think that's a pretty good insight into what Seth Littrell's offense is going to look like at Oklahoma.
Great story by Dakota. I do have bad news for everyone. We have no promo code running right now for half off for the year, anything like that. That's because we're free all the time. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. All of our content. All you got to do is scroll, baby, scroll. Click and scroll, and you can do whatever you want there. Randall, do you want to hop in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think marrying those two styles, kind of that vertical deep passing game with that smash mouth power run game really fits with some of the personalities you have. You think about Bill Bedenbaugh, how he wants to play. He wants those smash mouth physical offensive linemen who are road graders, who can run that power run scheme. But behind those guys, you've got a five-star quarterback like Jackson Arnold, who we already mentioned. He's got a cannon. He can put the ball deep downfield. So marrying those two concepts together, being able to kind of play both styles, I think that'll be really beneficial for Oklahoma's offense this year.
Let's talk a little about that offensive line. It was kind of what we expected it. Here's your left to right. Ready? Let's see if I can do it from memory. The one thing I don't have in front of me, I've got big gulps. I got sticky notes galore. I don't have the depth chart in front of me, which was a great oversight. Who's got it? But left tackle, Tarquin. Left guard, Sexton. It was the SMU transfer, Branson Hickman, who slotted in there at center. You've got Febechi Wewu at right guard. And then you had the oars at right tackle, Jake Taylor or Spencer Brown. Candidly, we've heard that Spencer Brown's had a really good summer and fall. I think that probably has more to do with Jake Taylor having a minor injury that's kind of had him held out a little bit. Very similar, I feel like, to the Brennan Thompson, Nick Anderson. Not saying that Brennan Thompson didn't earn it, but Nick Anderson's been held out a little bit. Obviously not going to play on Friday. I kind of asked Brent Venables this, and he moved around it a little bit, but I was basically asking, how do you balance wanting to develop that depth at offensive line? The thing I didn't say was playing a really bad opponent as well, versus knowing that you have 5 new pieces. And I think we can officially label it a new piece because Sexton's playing at guard instead of tackle. So I feel comfortable not splitting the atom of, well, he did have 3 starts at the end of all that stuff. 5 new pieces on the offensive line. Brent Venables did talk about, like, yes, they want to get deeper at that spot, and that's not something they've been able to do in the past. And he acknowledged chemistry is a real thing. That's something that he talked about along the offensive line. That's going to be huge for the Sooners, especially with James Pierce flying off the edge when the Volunteers roll into town on September 21st. If you were Bill Bedenbaugh, how would you attack this first 5, assuming that 5 plays well initially and is doing everything you want them to do, and you're not having to tinker because of not getting everything you want out of them? How long would you roll those guys out there? Is it more important to just practice against the D-line? What would kind of your philosophy be, trying to keep everybody healthy while building that chemistry?
Yeah, well, first of all, you asked me if I was Bill Bedenbaugh. I got the feeling there for just a second that I was Bill Bedenbaugh. I went back and looked at my projected depth chart that I did back in early April, before the spring game. Maybe right before the spring game, so we had a little bit of insight. But wrote a piece for a preview for Lindy's magazine. I went back and looked at my 2 deep. Guys, I was 10 for 10 on the offensive line. Got the starters right in the positions, and I got the backups right in their positions. So, holy cow. I need to go back and ask for a raise on that magazine fee. But anyway, I would probably say, Ryan, I'm keeping those guys on the field deep into the fourth quarter. Maybe 8 minutes to go in the game before you start subbing, because they're all new guys for the most part. They're still building that chemistry for the most part. There's a moment in a game when you've stomped somebody into oblivion, and you look up at the scoreboard and the fans have emptied out, or at least the student section has emptied out, and they're playing videos up on the board, and you're standing out there with your offensive line mates during a TV timeout. And I gotta believe that there's that moment where it's like that pause in a battle, right? You've got the battle won, and that's when the kind of unspoken chemistry, or really stuff that's hard to quantify. It's hard to identify what I'm talking about here, really, truly. But there's that moment where you're standing there and you're just looking at your guys in the huddle, and you're waiting for the TV ref to come on with his little orange gloves, and you're saying, we're going to be okay. We did this. How about this? How about this for a starter? Bring on the SEC. We did it, brother. I think I'm keeping them out there. And that moment can happen on the sideline as well, when everybody's over there getting a Gatorade or whatever it is, getting a cold towel on the head. But standing out there on the field, 6 minutes to go in the game, up 56-10, I think there's some bonding that happens there. So maybe I'm overrating it. Maybe I'm overvaluing it and overstating it. But I think that's something Bill Bedenbaugh probably has identified years ago in his coaching is keep them on the field as long as you can, let them develop together as long as you can.
I totally agree with you there, Who. I think that, I obviously I didn't play at the collegiate level, but as someone who played in high school, I know that, those bonds with your teammates, the real moments that you create that real team camaraderie, that chemistry is, in the heat of the moment, in the battle, and like you said, when you have that feeling of success, the feeling of victory, that's when you really feel that accomplishment. And that's what helps you grow together with your teammates. So I think that, this is the perfect opportunity for Oklahoma, an opponent that they know, Houston, Tulane, obviously are teams you should go out and beat, but they've got a little more talent. Obviously that'll be a little bit of a tougher group. But this game is an easy opportunity for Oklahoma to go out there, road grade these guys, rack up some big yards, some point totals, and build that confidence that you need to head into, these next few non-conference games, head into the SEC. And like you said, build the chemistry, just get used to playing with each other, really, aside from, a practice setting. That's not as much as you try, as much as Brent Venables tells you that you can't really replicate that game setting.
Just ask Zach Schmidt. Low blow, never mind. I think that you'll see, I don't think you'll see like the same guys for the first half. I think you'll see probably a little bit of rotation there anyway. Whatever that number of guys that Bill Bedenbaugh's kind of rotating to tinker with, if that's 8 guys, I'd like to see a drive or two at least of Michael Hawkins behind that group, just so maybe you can get a better evaluation. I just candidly don't know what the Oklahoma 2s versus the Temple 2s or 3, like what that will look like. And we saw Michael Hawkins kind of having to do a little bit of fire drill action in the spring game, stuff like that. I just like to see Michael Hawkins be able to get in there without having to do that. Get some comfort, get some confidence, just because Oklahoma's needed their backup quarterback in both of the last 2 seasons. And knock on wood, hope that's not the case, obviously, for anybody, but it's just the reality of the situation. So we've kind of talked a little bit about Brennan Thompson. I don't think that we're going to see a ton of super exotic ways that the Deion Burks and Jalil Farouks of the world are going to be used against Temple. Pretty vanilla. I just think they'll still dominate because they're that good. But what do you guys want to see out of Jackson Arnold in this start? For me, it's pretty simple. A twofold: no turnovers, but I also want it to look. I have a high bar for this stuff, but I'll take you all the way back to 2007. There was a man by the name of Sam Bradford who had 3 touchdowns, 2 incompletions, absolutely shredded North Texas. And it's not the actual stats of the touchdowns versus the incompletions. It's the fact that Sam didn't look like he broke a sweat. It looked like it was pitch and catch. It looked like he was throwing on air because everything was not rushed, in stride, all that stuff. Arnold's got that kind of talent inside him, and this is outside of Maine, as carefree as it's going to be. That's kind of what I want to see. It doesn't need to be 70 points. It doesn't need to be 21-23, but just no turnovers, certainly, but calm, collected. And I want it to look like that Jackson Arnold's played 30 college football games instead of basically this is his 7th meaningful quarter once kickoff happens.
You want him to look like arguably the best quarterback in school history.
Yeah.
In his debut, yeah. I remember.
High bar.
I was there. High bar, for sure. I was there. I remember covering that game. And we were just like, when is he ever going to throw an incompletion? I think he threw 16 straight completions or something like that in that game. Very impressive performance by Sam. I'm not going to put that much expectation on him. Just 0 turnovers. Whatever you do, hang on to the football. Make sure that what you think you're seeing in the coverage, right, what you believe that to be, make sure that's what it is before you throw the football. That's what got him the 2 early interceptions in the Alamo Bowl. He thought he saw something. He unleashed it, uncorked it, sent it on its way, and then realized as the ball's flying, oh, that wasn't man-to-man after all. That was zone. Crap, I didn't see that guy. That's going to be a pick 6 or a pick coming at me. He's grown from that time. He's talked a lot about how much he's grown. He's grown in practice. That was the last game he played. This is the next game he's playing. I want to see how much he's grown in these games.
I think that, my answer is going to be very similar to y'all. I'm just going to phrase it a little bit differently. I just make the right decisions. I want to see whenever he's back there, whether it's, handing the ball off in an RPO or an option, whether it's, making the right reads in the passing game, when to check down, when to go deep, which receiver to hit, when to just, take the sack, when to check, tuck it and run. I just want to see Jackson Arnold make those right decisions because, like you said, in his first start, we didn't necessarily see that, right? So I think that if you can see the progression over the offseason, if he's able to make the right decisions, then you can really say, okay, he obviously this is Temple, but it looks like, the film study that's paid off for him. He's just gaining more knowledge of how to play quarterback at the collegiate level rather than just being a high schooler and, using his physical talent to beat everyone. And so I think that it'll be really interesting to see that mental side of things here against Temple, because if Temple is able to confuse Jackson Arnold, if he's making the wrong reads, the wrong decisions against Temple, then I think that's where you start to worry about, later in the season. Even if the stats look good, if some of those decisions are wrong, then maybe you worry, because if the Temple defense is flummoxing Jackson Arnold, what is, Alabama, what is Texas's defense going to do?
Yeah, especially because this will be one of the 2 simplest game plans he probably gets. This one and the main game plan is going to be as vanilla as possible. Last little thing here on the offense before we flip over to kind of what we saw in the defensive depth chart. Javonte Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk, they're your co-starters at the starting running back spot. You had Samuel Franklin and then Taylor Tatum behind those guys. Then Caleb Hicks was kind of slotted 5th there on that. It's kind of an interesting spot. Typically, I wouldn't be worried at all about the running backs or anything like that. Hoover, am I wrong to say I kind of want to see a little bit more of Javonte Barnes than maybe you would typically see out of a running back in an opener where you don't expect it to be competitive, considering everything that was the 2023 Javonte Barnes experience?
Yeah, he needs to come out and get some carries and have a little contact and make some moves and have some runs where he, pops a 15-yard run or a 25-yard run or something like that. I want to see him get some action. In terms of surprises on the depth chart, I have to say I was a little surprised that he is the co-starter, so to speak, air quotes, with Gavin Sawchuk. Gavin is your starter from last year. I'm down with that, but Barnes has apparently, who had a great freshman season, backing up Eric Gray. He's had a great preseason. So if he had a great freshman year, got hurt last year, he's had a great preseason, and he's ready to go, then, you've got co-starters at running back. I think a lot of people were surprised about Hicks being fifth. I don't know what's the surprise when you've got those two guys that are back for their third season, Barnes and Sawchuk, and you've got a transfer from the FCS who can absolutely fly and, is renowned for 60-yard touchdown runs in his career. He's got 5 of them, I think. And then you got the number 1 running back in the country, and Taylor Tatum as a recruit. Where's Hicks supposed to be? Where's Hicks supposed to go? He looks good in practice. We see little clips of him playing on Randall's video, and we see, little clips that OU puts out. And he looks good, but there's nowhere to fit a fifth running back in that first rotation. There's just not. So I was a little surprised about Barnes being a co-starter and a little surprised to the reaction about Hicks.
Yeah, I think Hicks, it's just, we've heard so many good things, but, when the depth chart comes out, like you said, where does he fit? That'll be interesting to keep tabs on how that progresses throughout the season, kind of what his workload is. You mentioned Barnes, Ryan, going back to your original question, I would definitely would want to see Barnes because one, as for what I want to see him back up what we've heard, right? We've heard that he looks great. Let's go out, let's see it against live competition, against guys who are actually trying to tackle you, guys who don't want you, to gain yards. Let's see how he looks, physically against those guys. And two, I think for him personally, he needs to build that confidence back up. I mean, obviously his teammates and him personally and his coaches have been doing that for him, but this is a guy who hasn't really done much at all in the past year on the field. So he probably needs that confidence boost. If he can go out and get a 100-yard game against Temple, I think that would be a really good way for him to kind of boost his confidence heading into the rest of the season.
Should be interesting to see, especially with no coach, obviously. How are they ever going to get by? I don't know. Maybe the two guys that ran for 100 yards each against an actual excellent elite Florida State defensive line. Maybe I shouldn't knock the Florida State D-line. It's an all Georgia Tech thing, as you guys know. We're going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball here. You guys both scream at me if I go too off the rails here, but I think the defensive depth chart is a little bit more straightforward at every spot except one. I'm going to go back to front, and you'll see what I kind of leave out here for a second. Safety, pretty much exactly what I think we all expected. Billy Bowman, one of those guys, Robert Spears-Jennings and Peyton Bowen, or they're going to play a ton at that other spot. I don't think there was really any shock there. Linebacker, you've got, whether it be the cheetah spot with Kendall Dolby and then Samuel Omosigo, I think that was pretty much everyone's projection. Stutzman and Kip Lewis, and then how those guys backfilled in behind them, whether it be Lewis Carter, Jaron Cannett, Kobe McKenzie, Deshaun McCullough being listed on it, even though we know he's probably not going to play on Friday. I don't think that was really shocking at all. We already talked about Jaden Jackson. Outside of, again, Jaden Jackson being listed as the starter, I think the interior of that defensive line filtered out about how you would think outside of the freshmen. And even at on the edge there, we had basically said Ethan Downs, R. Mason Thomas, those guys are going to be your starters, and then pick your order from there based off who they slot as the right defensive end, the left defensive end, all that stuff. The only thing that really was like, I'm not sure I really expected that was we're going 5 wide, boys. Jay Valai has pioneered football. He is going to start 5 cornerbacks. It's not quite Auburn, who listed 37 starters on defense with all the oars that they had. Good luck, Hugh Freeze. Figure that out. We believe in you. But you had Woody Washington or Kenai Walker or Gentry Williams or Des Malone or Jacoby Johnson, all 5 of those guys. We knew they were going to rotate guys. We've talked a lot about Gentry stays healthy. He's probably going to be your most high ceiling corner. The Des Malone, physical presence. Jacoby Johnson's coming on sharp. I did not expect them to go with what would that technically be, 3 oars to get to 5 dudes who at corner?
Breaking news, I guess we didn't realize this. Brent Venables is switching to the 3-3-5, and the 5 is going to be 5 cornerbacks, right? That's what we're looking at. I was a little surprised by what we saw from the cornerback position. For the last 3 years, we've said Woody Washington's back at cornerback. He's a 4-year starter. This is his 5th year, 6th year. This is his 5th year, I believe. But he's a 4-year starter at corner. He's been through the wars in the Big 12. He's made game-changing plays in the end zone against Texas, right? I mean, the kid has seen everything. He's done everything. The depth chart comes out, and he is behind Kenai Walker, sort of. Kenai Walker or Woody Washington. And then on the other side, we've talked a lot about Gentry Williams being maybe the most talented corner on the team if his shoulder holds up. But he banged his shoulder up in a scrimmage, in a preseason scrimmage, and so that opens the door for Gentry or for Des Malone, the transfer from San Diego State, to come in and say, "Hey, I've done this too. I've played college football. I've got a good resume. I've got a long frame and long arms, and I'm a big body, and I can do this too." So I am intrigued by what we're going to see at the cornerback position Friday, and I'm intrigued how that's going to evolve all season, especially where does Jacoby Johnson fit? He's a guy that when you say co-starter or, is he on that line? He's a guy that I don't think any of us would have predicted would be in that rotation or in that conversation as starting cornerback. He's incredibly athletic. He's probably the most athletic person on the team. In other words, I think he could do the most sports. He could play Division I basketball if he wanted to. He's that good. He could probably run Division I track. And to be a corner on a team in the Southeastern Conference, and you might be starting, tells you how athletic you are. So I got to admit, I'm very surprised by Jacoby Johnson and the fact that your 2 starting corners are not necessarily your 2 starting corners.
I think it's really interesting that you've got kind of the separation between, the veteran guys you mentioned and the Woody Washingtons, the Des Malones, and behind them you've got Kenai Walker and Jacoby Johnson, 2 guys who are kind of your prototypical SEC corners, right? Tall, really long arms, really, really good athletes. Those are 2 guys who can run. They're built really strong. They can, like you said, they can run, they can jump, long arms, tall guys. Those are the guys that you really want in the SEC. So I think that both of those guys being in the mix is good for OU, and especially in a game like this where you're probably not going to get tested on the outside as much as you would against, some of the other teams on the schedule. You can throw guys like Jacoby Johnson, like Kenai Walker out onto the field and let them learn, let them get those live reps against, other receivers that are, again, not on their own team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Kind of like what we talked about, the offense, what you want to see. I think the defense is pretty simple. I don't think you want to see massive coverage busts. You want to see them dominate the line of scrimmage. Temple I think they're technically maintaining it's a 3-man quarterback race, not just the 2 that Oklahoma talked about this week. You got a Rutgers transfer, you got a JUCO guy. One of them's a statue, the Rutgers transfer, the JUCO guy, a little bit more mobile. The great Kelly Gregg was watching the Temple spring game. They had a starting offensive lineman who was responsible for allowing 6 sacks in the portion where the ones went on the ones. I think that's all you need to know about what it should look like as far as the result. So I'll toss this to you, Hoove. Zach Alley is coming in. One of the big questions is, he's a Brent Venables guy. So it's not going to be drastically different, things like that. But we have heard Danny Stutzman talk about a little bit that, hey, Zach Alley has been giving input. Hey, I ran a little bit more 3-3-5 or 3-down lineman look, things like that at Jacksonville State. And initially everyone's like, are we sure about that? That's Brent Venables over there. And then they all see how it works out and go, okay, do you think we're going to see any of that stuff? Or do you think it's going to roll out and be as basic as possible? Here's your 4-down lineman and hide everything for as long as possible to try and have nothing on tape. You would assume, hopefully, you don't have to use that against Houston and Tulane, stuff like that. Have nothing on tape for Nico Iamaleava coming in? Or do you throw it all out there and say, let's see if the true freshman can prepare for all these different looks, knowing that you're going to have wrinkles off of wrinkles and all that stuff through these 3 non-conference games?
I don't think there's any urgency to hide anything at this point. College football coaches are really smart. They know that. Remember, Brent, I think the split was pretty even, if I recall. In 2022, he played equal snaps, 3-man front and 4-man front. And one did so much better than the other, obviously the 4-man front, that he went to 4-man almost exclusively last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he allows Allie to revert back to whatever they need in a certain situation. If they need a nickel package or a dime package, you bring one of those big guys off and bring in like a Dasan McCulloch, a linebacker. Bring him down maybe, and is he a linebacker? Is he a defensive back at the Cheetah? So yeah, I mean, here's anytime you try to put Brent Venables' defense in a box, you're going to be surprised. And he's got more defensive signals, more defensive calls than probably anybody in the country. So surprised if he comes out I'd be surprised if he comes out in a 3-man front and stays in a 3-man front. I'll put it that way.
I now just really want to see Miguel Chavis just scream, "What's in the box?" Oh no, I think that's the
what's in the box.
That is what we need. I don't even know if Randall knows what we're talking. No. Randall, have you seen Seven?
What?
Wait, in Provo, we'll peel the curtain back. In Provo, we put together an extensive list of movies that Randall needs to see. Because you just didn't watch a ton of movies. Sounds like they're more of a TV house. A-okay, Seven's a good one. I would toss it your way. Maybe don't watch it right before bed, though. I don't know how you roll with that. But Randall, what are you kind of looking for with Zach Guy? What's your expectation of how vanilla, or even if they go odd and even, I don't think it's going to be anything extravagant. But you think you will see a little bit of that on Friday?
Yeah, I think that, like Hoover mentioned, Brent kind of switched more exclusively to the 4-man front last year, but I think now with the personnel that you've got on the roster in 2024, some of the kind of the versatile defensive linemen you've also got some different faces in the defensive backfield. I think that might let you maybe go back to switch to some of that multiple front, kind of try a few of those different looks. And if you want to get practice in some of those looks, again, against guys that aren't on your own team, that aren't seeing the same things every day, this is a good opportunity, because you don't want to wait till the SEC play comes to, throw out a new look and Tennessee runs you off the ball with a preseason all conference, offensive lineman and a 5-star quarterback. You'd rather try this out, see what it looks like, kind of get these guys used to that against a team like Temple. So I think that will be interesting. That's what I'm really looking forward to seeing from Zach Alley, is what do some of those formations, what do some of the concepts he'd run look like? Does Oklahoma's defense look drastically different at any level, really, not just overall, but at any level from when Ted Roof was coaching this group last year? And it might take a few weeks to truly know that, but I think it'll be telling this week. And again, just to kind of see how he interacts with some of the other coaches on the defensive staff. Again, now that it's not Ted Roof, now that it's him, and also how he interacts with the players on the sideline, being down there on the field, we get a pretty good glimpse of that. And we've heard from a bunch of his players. Jaden Jackson said it on Monday, or as Brent Venables would say, Tuesday. We heard from Jaden Jackson that, a lot of the players really feel like they can relate to Zach Alley, and because, as Jaden Jackson put it, he's young and hungry. And he said that this defense, the players on the defense feel like they're young and hungry as well, so they feel like they can relate to Zach Alley. I'm really interested to see how that plays out on game day, because obviously practice is one thing, but again, when you're in the heat of the battle, it's a lot different when those live bullets start flying. So how that relationship, how those interactions continue and evolve on game day.
Temple is not good, so we're going to see a lot of the second, third, fourth. Basically, if you suit up, you're probably going to play in an Oklahoma uniform on Friday night. Because of that, I don't think we're going to see much with special teams. I would be really actually stunned if they let those guys do a lot of returning, unless there's some one or two things that Doug Deacon really wants to hone in on, and they can only do that in live reps, just because there's no need to get anyone rolled up on against Temple. I don't think we're going to see any groundbreaking stuff in the kicking game, because I think that's only a question that could be answered when it comes to being in a spot where there is big time pressure. We do know that Brent Venables said Tyler Keltner will be the first one to roll out there at place kicker, he'll get the first hack at it, and that Zach Schmidt will get opportunities. He had made over 90% of his field goals in camp. That's what Brent Venables said. So I think we'll kind of leave our Temple preview here. Are there any freshmen or underclassmen that maybe didn't technically redshirt a year ago, but didn't play a ton last year that you really are juiced to see as this game gets going? For me, this is a very simple answer. There's a man on Oklahoma's roster who got a personal foul for a spring game, a scrimmage. That man is Michael Boganowski. If you're getting personal fouls going at your teammates in a scrimmage, I want to see what you look like when you are unleashed against opposition. A couple weeks ago, Robert Spears Jennings said that he wins the title of the thumper on defense when he comes down and tries to decapitate people. Kendall Dolby again, when he was asked kind of hey, is there anyone that you don't see some people talk about? Kendall Dolby talked about Michael Boganowski. So whether that's purely at safety, whether that's a little cheetah stuff, I mean, he's kind of been talked about possibly being moved around. I'm excited to see Boganowski, but Hoover, are there any of those underclassmen that you're just like juiced? Hey, this is the time to shine now that it's going to be what you would assume is a round.
When you say excited, I mean, yes, I'm excited to watch Michael Boganowski like I'm excited to watch Rocky 3. Clubber and Rocky standing in the middle of the ring just pounding each other. Randall, go watch Rocky 3. It's pretty good.
Watch 1 and 2 first.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Do 1 and 2 first. Funny story, man. You met you were in the same room with Sylvester Stallone, and you were like, hey, to your family, hey, do you guys know who this guy is?
Yeah, that
awesome
did happen.
story.
It happened. I was not aware.
My guy that I would want to be interested in seeing more of. Remember last year's I think season opener. He led the team in receptions, 9 catches last year in the season opener. Jaquez Petaway. I want to see again. Don't read too much into it. Like catching 9 balls in the opener last year. But I want to see him because he didn't do anything the rest of the year. A couple of grabs here and there, I think. But yeah, no, I want to see what his role is. He's listed as the backup to Deion Burks in the slot. So yes, him as an underclassman, young guy. If he gets a chance to carry the football, catch the football, get downfield, maybe get in the end zone, I think he's a guy that's going to ultimately have a profound impact on this offense because he's strong, he's explosive, he's got good hands, he's got a great attitude, he loves the game of football. So, you know, if he's one of those kids that just falls down the depth chart, you get worried that, hey, transfer portal's always open, right?
Yeah, especially because of how high of a recruit he was coming out of high school. Some of the athletic traits that he's got, if he hit the portal, he would have a lot of suitors.
Yeah.
There's 2 guys that I'm really looking forward to. One of them, the first one kind of feels like a bit of a cop-out answer. PJ Adebawore, I mean, I think that it'll be really interesting just to kind of see what he looks like, again, getting some live bullets after the offseason. This is a guy very, very highly touted, top 10 recruit in the country coming out of high school, a guy who by all accounts should have first-round potential. Let's see it. Let's see what it looks like against players who are not nearly as physically talented as him. Let's see what he can do. That's the first one that I'm really interested to see. The second one, another guy who has elite physical tools, and a guy we touched briefly on earlier, Eddie Pierre-Louis. This is a guy that, again, Brent Venables mentioned. If he came in December, again, he went to Tampa Catholic High School, so he had to finish out his full senior year of high school, wasn't able to be an early enrollee. If he had been able to be an early enrollee, Brent Venables said he might be starting at left guard. And that's really interesting to me because we talk about Jacob Sexton, right? This is a guy who started at tackle. We talked 6'6", 6'7". That's the body of an offensive tackle, right? He's got long arms. If Eddie Pierre-Louis is able to, really burst onto the scene, if he's got a good game, if he shows it off against Temple, and he continues to play really well, he continues to practice well, is there a chance that he's able to take over that starting guard job, like Caden Green did last year, midway through his true freshman season, and that could free Oklahoma to move Sexton back to tackle, whether that's left or right tackle, to kind of fill one of those spots? Is Eddie Pierre-Louis, is he good enough to be able to take that same trajectory, to be able to step in and start this year? I think that obviously we won't know based off of how he plays against Temple, but I think we'll get a really good indication of where he's at on Friday.
We'll get a great first look at a lot of those guys. And I can see it right now, everyone commenting in the YouTube comment section, which is always welcome, obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube. John Hoover Media is the channel, or yelling at their phone. We're obviously all going to be watching every move of David Stone, guys like that. We talked about him earlier. That's how this thing goes. Obviously, David Stone's going to be someone that we are laser focused on. I'm sure you can find 2,000 words on everything that David Stone does on Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com come probably Sunday, because I'm calling it right now, calling our shot. Saturday, you will have a lot of Zach Alley content on the website. It'll be the first. He exists. I got photos of him during fall camp. It felt a little dirty. I tried to sell those photos to Tennessee of him just standing, and Josh Heupel was like, no. We do not. I'm kidding, obviously. But yeah, we'll have all of that rolling. We'll also have the post-game pod from the press box. I believe the terminology on that is certified fresh. I think I've heard that once or twice before, as we break down everything that happens between the Sooners and the Owls. But guys, here's something really exciting about this weekend. We going to work on Friday. 85,000 of our loyal customers and friends are going to be hanging out with us as that bad boy is sold out. Oklahoma announced on Wednesday, which frees us up to watch a ton of college football on Thursday night, a ton of college football on Saturday and Sunday. And as we look around, we're still familiarizing ourselves with our news surroundings. A bunch of SEC games popped out this weekend. Obviously, on Thursday, you got Pine Bluff and Arkansas, Murray State, Missouri. Those are both going to go off the night before Oklahoma plays. Then early and often it comes heavy. Clemson, Georgia, that's your 11 a.m. kickoff on Saturday. Virginia Tech and Vandy, Chattanooga and Tennessee. I'll have an eye on that just to see if we can glean anything before Tennessee heads to Charlotte, play NC State next weekend. Texas got Colorado State, Miami and Florida. A lot of people watching that. Old Dominion, South Carolina, Eastern Kentucky, Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby's debuted there. Western Kentucky, Alabama, Furman, Ole Miss, Notre Dame A&M. Go Marcus Freeman, go. Alabama A&M and Auburn, Southern Miss, Kentucky. And then Sunday night, LSU, USC, which I'm sure no one around the Norman or greater Oklahoma City area will be interested in for any different reasons. I'm going to be watching Tennessee, like I said. I really want to see, as much as was made of Jackson Arnold's first bowl start, Nico Amaleva got the other end of that. It was great against Iowa. But obviously Clemson, Georgia, all that stuff. You got your eye on anybody trying to do some advanced scouting or just intrigue across the conference outside of the Trojans and the Tigers, who we'll get to here in a second?
LSU, USC obviously is a big one. Clemson and Georgia will be interesting, I think, for about a quarter and a half. Get the feeling that Clemson has fallen off a little bit of that level. And then I'm with you. I want to see Tennessee's. I want to see what Tennessee brings. I want to see really for myself how good that D-line is. I believe they're very good. And I want to see if the new quarterback is completely in sync with his. He's got a bunch of talented receivers. So, look forward to watching all those games. Trying to think. Auburn would be another one, an early game for us as we're going. That's our first SEC road game, the 28th, I believe. We'll be in Auburn for that one. So I'm eager to see how good Hugh Freeze and those guys at Auburn could be this year.
I think the game that I'm really excited to watch in the conference is a team that Oklahoma is very familiar with. Texas versus Colorado State.
Yeah.
Obviously, Colorado State was a big time late night watch last year when they played Colorado. That was a big time draw for everyone. So we're familiar with some of the faces on that Colorado State team. We know that they're a decent football team. They're not just going to roll over when they play Texas. And with the newcomers that Texas has, specifically at their skill positions, they replaced their top three wide receivers because Jordan Whittington is also gone now. So they replaced their top two wide receivers, obviously lost their top two running backs to injury, unfortunately, in fall camp. So it'll be really interesting for me to see how those skill position guys look. How do these new receivers look? Obviously, they brought some transfers in there. So you expect that those guys will be able to still play well, still live up to the expectation that Texas has. But, you have to see it first, right? And so I think it'll be really interesting to get the first look at those guys in burnt orange. Again, see how Quinn Ewers looks. I think there's been a few just the guys who left Texas last year, the defensive linemen, things like that. There's been some questions in Austin about how ready Texas is to replace some of those guys. So I think it'll be really interesting to get a first look at that against a Colorado State team who we know is going to come out, even if they're not as talented as Texas, they're going to want to throw that first punch. They're going to give it their all. And so I think that Texas will have to come out and be ready to fight.
I do have a question for you guys. We didn't really address it on our depth chart rundown, but I think we need to. I think it's an important question. What's going on with Deshaun McCullough? He is not a cheetah anymore this year. I know he's missed the whole preseason running around on his little scooter with a toe injury, as Brent Venables talked about. But he's not even a cheetah anymore. He's a will linebacker now. And if you're to believe the depth chart, Kip Lewis or Lewis Carter or Deshaun McCullough is your starting will linebacker. We were told none of this when the preseason started.
This wasn't quite a Deshaun White getting moved in the middle of camp situation, but I think if we go back to the spring, McCullough had been bounced inside a little bit, which just kind of leads to frankly, I'm not sure where Dasan McCullough fits in this defense. He's going to be used as an inside linebacker. I think we saw a little bit of the limitations of him being out in space a year ago when it comes to some coverage stuff. And Oklahoma, Brent Venables spoke just glowingly of Kendall Dolby. Kendall Dolby has been one of the more quiet names throughout camp, not because I don't think they're super, upset with Dolby or anything like that, because I think he's just been so steady and he's just your cheetah. I don't know what that's going to look like. I imagine there's going to be a ton of patches. You go back and you watch that goal line stand against Texas, and there's not many linebackers in the country that are just saying, I'm going to take the fight to Murphy and Sweat and bounce those guys back into the backfield. So I think there's definitely a spot to play. I just don't know if McCullough as the every down option right beside Stutzman once he returns. I don't expect him to really get much run here this week. More same with in the Nick Anderson situation of just seems precautionary, things like that. But I think that's one of the great questions on the defense as a whole is once he gets back and healthy, how much is he really going to be out there firing, especially once you saw between Kip Lewis and Stutzman, how good they were. Kobe McKenzie, the role he played a year ago when Stutzman missed those 6 quarters, second half against Kansas, the whole Bedlam game, Lewis Carter, everything we've heard about him. Is this a situation of it's time for Zach Alley and Brent Venables to just get creative to work those guys in? And maybe it just shows how many different looks you can give, Randall, when you've got basically a guy that has experience as a just straight up edge rusher that you can maybe walk down a little bit as a quote unquote fourth defensive lineman, linebacker, stuff like that.
I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think that a lot of the move to cheetah was the struggles to cover in space, right? I think a big part of playing the cheetah position is having a guy that you can put out there who you can trust to cover guys, but also play a box safety kind of role where he can come down and hit people. And while Dolby might not have the size of a typical box safety, Brent Venables said he thinks he plays like he's 6'2", 220. And the thing, and he's also able to cover, obviously, because he was a slot corner. He's got that cornerback background. And I think, like you mentioned perfectly, a lot of Dasan McCullough's highlights, his best moments last year were in the box, closer to the line of scrimmage. So how can you put him in more of those situations? I think putting him in more of those situations is putting him in that will linebacker role, where he is playing more in the box. He doesn't have to go cover tight ends out that are running, wheel routes because go back against Cincinnati, you can see that flummoxed him. He got beat deep on a wheel route by a tight end who's not as good as the tight ends that OU's going to be playing this year in the SEC. And that there was a few times where he got beat in pass coverage. So I think that moving him into a role where he doesn't have to cover. Not that the linebackers don't have to cover, but don't have to cover those deeper areas of the field as much, where he can kind of stay closer, more intermediate areas of the field. That would probably play better to his skill set. But like you mentioned, Ryan, with how crowded the linebacker room is, Brent Venables has recruited that room really, really well. They've developed really, really well. I mean, we've heard rave reviews from Brent Venables and others about Lewis Carter. That room is stacked. So when he does come back, when he is fully healthy, how does he factor in? How does he get in some of those rotational snaps? Obviously, again, in the SEC, you're going to want to play a ton of linebackers. You're going to want to have depth so none of those guys get tired. But if you're third on the depth chart, how much are you really playing?
I know we've talked about Pro Football Focus in the past and what their metrics mean, and it's hard to decipher. They have their own proprietary formula for what their ratings are. But Dasan McCullough rated last year overall second on the defense among the guys who got a lot of snaps, not Devon Sears, not Shane Witter, not Connor Neer, but among the guys who got a lot of snaps. He rated number 2 on the defense overall with a grade of 79.5, and his coverage grade, 88.2, was number 1 for guys who played coverage. The number 1 coverage guy on the team was Trace Ford, a defensive end who got an interception on his own blitz. Number two, or when you talk about bulk snaps, number 1 was Dasan McCullough with an 88.2 grade. So, listen, I'm not going to put him back there at free safety and let him, solve the world's problems as a roaming free safety. But his lowest grade as a player, his lowest area was as a pass rusher, and I don't understand why that would be, other than he's not a big, thick, barrel-chested, big, brawny, huge dude. He's very long. He's very lean. He's very agile. He's just right in between what you would want from an edge rusher and a safety. And, hopefully he finds a spot quickly. He doesn't look like a will linebacker to me. He doesn't traditionally look like the will linebackers that Oklahoma has had lining up at that spot before. Maybe he'll find a spot. Maybe it'll eventually be back at Cheetah. I don't know. This is just one game. It's just one depth chart.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see, something to track throughout the year. I think the rotations defensively, I'm much more interested in seeing them after the first couple of games, as guys can kind of make their move as opposed to some of the known quantities. So we shall see. We're not making our picks for OU and Temple here. Why? You know this. It's going to be on the site, usually on Fridays, but it'll be Thursday afternoon, right? Because Thursday is Friday and Friday is Saturday and all that stuff. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, where you can find one big thing. So where you can find 3 keys to the game, where you can find all the staff picks, all of the breaking down the opponent by the numbers. Pray for me, everybody, trying to figure out any numbers about Temple. 3-9, 3 straight years. That might be the only numbers. I just 3-9, 3-9, 3-9. So we're going to instead pick LSU, USC, one that has a lot of intrigue for Oklahoma fans. Do you just simply say you're in the SEC now, fly the SEC flag? It does everything you want, which is you get to point and laugh at Lincoln Riley, all that stuff. Do you suddenly go mentally, well, you got to close the season in Baton Rouge. Any loss between now and then just maybe takes that atmosphere back by 0.5%, maybe 1%, probably not, since LSU. 2 new quarterbacks breaking in there, 2 bad defenses trying to get better, and they didn't really get a great personnel boost with the portal. Hoove, do you have any clue what this thing is going to look like, or is it going to be beautiful slop, kind of like LSU and Florida State was a couple years ago when they played that bad boy in New Orleans in a very, very weird game with mixed extra points, and it looked sloppy, even though they were both pretty good football teams?
Give me Garrett Nussmeier for blackjack, Lincoln Riley for snake eyes. This one's being played in Vegas. I don't know. I just think at this stage, both teams, I think, had a terrific, dynamic Heisman Trophy winning quarterback last year, which is interesting, and defenses that stunk, which is interesting. Who made the best defensive improvements? Certainly both programs did make, new hires, got new players in. Who took the longest strides to get back to defensive respectability? I got to believe it's Brian Kelly. I got to believe it's LSU.
I was muted. I apologize. I would also go with LSU. I think that Garrett Nussmeier is a little bit of a more known commodity than Miller Moss at the quarterback position. He's started a few bowl games, looked pretty good, or maybe I shouldn't say started, played significant snaps in a few bowl games, looked pretty good doing it. I think that LSU is pretty confident in the weapons they have coming back. Obviously, it's really hard when you've got to replace 2 first-round wide receivers, one who was a top 6 pick, the other one who led the SEC in touchdowns last year. So obviously those are going to be 2 big shoes to fill. But from what we heard from Brian Kelly at SEC Media Days, LSU seems pretty confident in their ability, in the guys that they've got coming back to do that. They've got a really good tight end, Jason Taylor's son, Mason Taylor, at tight end there for LSU. So I think that in the end of the day, the battle of 2 offenses, LSU's is going to be a little more consistent, a little more proven commodity there. And obviously you've got Will Campbell, the left tackle there, who is one of the top players in the country, one of the best offensive linemen in the country, probably going to be a really, really high draft pick. If nothing else, I think that he and the rest of that offensive line will be enough to lead LSU to a victory.
This one's tough, man. Brian Kelly's got the killer instinct. We know this. Oops. Lincoln Riley might be the greatest shootout head coach that we've ever seen in college football. I don't know if I really trust Miller Moss or Garrett Nussmeier either, but I do think I trust Lincoln Riley in a shootout. I don't think he's going to play many of these in Big Ten football. We'll find out pretty quick what Michigan will have for the Trojans next week when Michigan and Texas get after it. But I don't know. I lean LSU. Like, my brains is kind of just going, yeah, all the athletes, stuff like that. But in a kooky, really weird week 1 game when it's going to be chaotic, I kind of feel like Lincoln Riley thrives in the chaos a little bit when it comes to calling those games. But we shall see. I guess I can pick USC and avoid the sweep and avoid the kiss of death, but I don't know. I think this is going to look a lot more like the opening weekend game of 2 years ago than the last year where LSU kind of got walked in the second half down there at Camping World. But for us, we're going to be locked in on Friday, which means you're going to get everything you need, all of our game day coverage per usual, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. It's always free. That includes the live blog that Hoover and I are just going to be hammering away like madmen all game long. Everything we see, everything Randall sees that he can relay up to us if the Wi-Fi is cooperating, all that stuff. All the post-game video, everything that Zach Alley has to say, you'll find out how he speaks, what he sounds like, either Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, or if you're a YouTuber, head to John Hoover Media on the YouTube channel. And then, like we said, Saturday, Sunday, all the post-game content will flow all the way over. So be sure you hit us up there for all your game day stuff. If you're on X, follow us all at Sooners on SI is the catch-all, but you can also hit up John E. Hoover. I am _ Ryan Chapman. Randall is Randall Sweet 5. We got Bryce Bryce on X, and then Dakota, who, again, I would encourage you, all the encouragement in the world, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Go read his story on Mason. Give him a follow at Dakota Gregory. But that's all we'll have next time we talk to you. Oklahoma will have played Temple. The season will be kicked off. It will be one game closer to the SEC coming to Norman. But until then, we'll talk to you guys. We'll see you next time on the Oklahoma Sooners on SI podcast.